Hey folks, welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to work with two AWS accounts, and we're going to set up cross-account access from the one account to the second account. Now, a common scenario for this would be, let's say that you're working in a software development company, and you have an account for dev and also a prod account. And let's say it's a pretty large company. So rather than set up user accounts for each user in both of these accounts, we can set up accounts for each user in one account. And with cross-account access, by configuring an IAM role, we can provide access to the second account, and in this case, an S3 bucket to our users. So thinking about scenarios, it's pretty simple. Anytime you have a scenario where you want users in one account to access resources in a second account, then you want to set up cross-account access. So in the DevOps doctrine, let's go into S3 concepts for DevOps. Let's click cross-account access, and let's take a look at our diagram. So we have a dev account and a production account. So in our production account, we are storing application information in an S3 bucket. Now again, we have our dev team who the majority of the time are working in the dev account, but of course it makes sense that they would need access to this data in the production account. We have a large team, and rather than set up user accounts in both dev and production, which could be a management nightmare, we can use cross-account access. Now, a common way to do this would be to create an IAM group for the dev team. We can apply our role, which contains a policy, to that group. So we're going to set up our role and policy in the production account. This will be the trusting account, trusting in that it's going to trust our dev team over here in the trusted account. So the end result is going to be a role that our dev team can access in the management console to switch accounts. And we'll see all of this shortly. Now, being developers, they're going to want programmatic access, and that's available as well. They can use API calls to access this bucket. Looking at our steps, now the big first step is we need to create a role. But the preparatory step is that we want to have this access policy that we're going to attach to the role. We need to associate the role with our dev account, the trusted account. We'll attach our access policy to the role. We need to record this role's ARN, and then we can modify a dev user account. Now we're just going to work with one account. Real world, we'd probably have a dev group that we could work with as a whole. And finally, we can test access by switching to the new role. All right, so let's go ahead and configure this. Now, before we do anything, let's just create a new S3 bucket. I usually turn versioning on, but we'll just leave it off for this demonstration. All right, now we need to go over to IAM. Okay, so first we need a policy for our role. Now, let's go into policies, and we could create our own policy. Choose a service, we can specify S3, and then we can start to set up access. But this is our dev team, and we place a lot of trust in our dev team. So we'll just use an AWS managed policy for S3 full access. So we have our policy. All right, so let's go into roles, and let's create a role. And note, we have our option here, another AWS account belonging to you or a third party. And I'll explain a key difference here. All right, So this is the account ID for our dev account. Now note our options. We can require MFA and we can require an external ID. Best practice when a third party will assume this role. If you give out this cross-account access to a third party without this external ID, you could run into a situation known as the confused deputy. And that's a situation where a third party to your third party could get this information and gain access to your account. If you require an external ID, note, to assume this role, users must be in the trusted account and provide this exact external ID. That's important to know, but obviously not our situation. We own this account, so we don't need to provide that. Let's go to permissions, and we identified this managed policy that we want to use, Amazon S3 full access. Let's click review. Cross account for dev, note, trusted entities, and of course our policy. So let's create the role and let's just verify. There it is. And let's go back into our role. I missed one point. Note, give this link to users who can switch roles in the console. Now with a dev team, most likely they're going to be accessing this S3 bucket via API calls in their code, but for demonstration purposes, let's just copy that to our clipboard. And of course, you could just email this to your dev group. Now, another thing we want to record is this role ARN, and we'll need this, so let's copy that. All right, now, to complete this task, I'm going to sign out of this account and sign in to our second account. Okay, so this is the second account that we have already trusted. So let's go into IAM. All right, now let's go into groups. Now in the scenario, this would be a full-blown dev group. I just created a small group of 1. Let's go into that group and let's check out inline policies. So there are none. We need to create an inline policy, and we want a custom policy. And let's click select. Let's just call it cross account. And I'm going to paste a policy in and explain its contents. All right, and this is a simple policy where effect is to allow action assume role. Now, we need to put in the account ID of our other account, which is our trusting account. And we need to provide the name of the role. X account for dev, that is the role we created in the trusting account. Okay, so let's apply the policy. All right, so we're down through step 6. We've modified the dev user account to enable switching to the role. So finally, I'm going to sign in as one of our dev users. Okay, so I'm signed in as our dev user, M. Crummert. So let's click on our user, and we can switch role. Now we need to provide the account ID of our production account and the role, and let's click switch role. And note how this changed. So we have created this trust from production to dev. Our dev team can now work with this S3 bucket. Let's go over to S3. There it is, bucket for cross account. Should we be able to create a folder? Well, they have full access. There we go. So to recap, we've created this cross-account access from production to dev. We created an access policy for our S3 bucket. We attached it to our role in prod. We associated that role with the dev account by providing the dev account ID. And then we went over to dev and we enabled this switching. And we have successfully configured cross-account access between these two accounts. So with that, we have completed this lesson. Go ahead and mark it complete, and let's move on to the next.